Hello, everyone. So we are live today with the fabulous Renee Myers. And I am so excited to have this conversation. And I always say that, right? But like every time I get on a live, it's like, it's another person I'm so excited to talk to. So I only do lives when it's somebody really great and we're going to have an awesome conversation. And I know that all of you out there on LinkedIn have been waiting for this because I've been seeing the shares, I've been seeing the posts.
Yay!
And, we really have to say thank you to LinkedIn because part of this, the reason we're having this conversation is that both of our courses have hit some astronomical numbers on LinkedIn Learning, and they have to do with unconscious bias, diversity, belonging, equity, all the things that are important in work right now. So I'm going to go ahead and let Renee, even though I know you don't really need an introduction, I'm going to let you introduce yourself.
Hey, Stacey, thank you so much for doing this with me. And Stacey has the #1 talk on LinkedIn Live. And so I'm just very excited to be here with you. I think a lot of people know that I've been yapping about unconscious bias and diversity and inclusion for more than 20 years. And today actually is my 3rd year anniversary at Netflix, which kind of blows my mind because I never expected to be there. And now I've been there for 3 years. And it's been an amazing ride, especially for a consultant that has been doing this as long as I have. It was highly unlikely that I was going to go inside. But I also started thinking that perhaps this was a company or a platform that would really allow this work to spread more quickly, mostly because they are a creator and they make stories. And often stories, as you know, Stacey, are either the things that help us to see more or that reinforce stereotypes, right? And so so that's me, y'all. I'm a lawyer by training, but I've been consulting for a long time on D&I to all sorts of companies.
See, you're good with that because I dropped out. I'm a law school dropout.
Girl,
I did a year of law school and I was like, this is not for me. So then I went to business school.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that I did that because it really helped me to see. I do think of things from a legal perspective. I spent 10 years as paralegal working in the legal field and then went into recruiting. And the recruiting is really what brought me to diversity and inclusion because I was doing it from a diversity lens all the time. And then I realized, I was like, wait, other people aren't. Why not? I don't understand. What is happening? Yeah. And that's what then pushed me into talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion as a focus and not just as recruiting, because recruiting is the big doorway, right, into DEI. But there are so many other windows and doors that we don't pay as close attention to. So that's what we're going to talk about today is what are some of the things, because I totally respect, right, that you've gone inside, right, you've left us consultants. But what I'm seeing with a lot of the CEOs that I'm talking to is they really want to know, they are struggling with, how do we do this and not put our foot in our mouths? How do we say the right thing? How do we do this and not be uncomfortable? And when I say this, I mean, how do we wrap our arms around diversity, equity, inclusion and start showing our companies and our employees that we actually do care about this, but we really just don't know how.
Yeah. I think the truth of the matter is that they care about it. It's not that they don't know how, it's that they are perceiving that the how involves a level of commitment, some resources, a change of culture, and they're concerned that they won't be as successful, quite frankly, if they embrace this with the kind of commitment and long-term passion that it requires. And so it's like a lot of us when we want to change things in our lives, right?
Right.
And then you read the book and maybe you listen to the podcast and then you get all ready and then you go to the gym once and you're like, whoa, that's hard, right? Now I got to do this how many days a week, you know? And then you're like, you know what? Never mind. I'm kind of good how I am. And I think,
right.
For my consultancy, I had seen that where you go to a company, they ask you to do an assessment, you give them this beautiful PowerPoint, you say what needs to be done, and they usually go, wow, really? Okay, well, yeah, I don't think we're going to do that. And they're, you know, they're risk. Some of our clients, not all of them, are risk adverse, and a lot of clients have been quite successful in how they've run their places. What DEI says is that you're going to have to undergo a cultural shift,
Right.
almost in every company, right? Almost every company has been sort of created with a certain kind of success model, a certain group of people that they, you know, more likely to hire, places they're more likely to hire. All of that is called into question if you are truly committed to DE&I.
Right. It is definitely a change. And I have to shout out Dr. Thiele Thatch. I see you. We've got people, you know, saying hello from all over California. I'm seeing Dublin, Ireland.
Oh, it's so good. I wish we could see their faces, but yeah.
I know. I'm seeing Portland, Oregon. So I just want to shout out a few people and say hello. Thank you for joining us this morning. We appreciate you being here. If you have questions, drop them in the chat. Because we only have like another 20 minutes. So this is a short, quick snippet because I know Renee has a crazy schedule. But so here's the thing that I see, right? That yes, leaders want to do the work, right? Or they think they want to do the work. But then when they find out how much work it is, they're like, wait, that's a lot. But I think where I try to get to is reframing that. Because when we think about, I want to be a sales leader, I want to make a lot of money, right? We don't hit a goal and then say, oh, we hit the goal. Great. Everyone can go home. Let's shut down, right? Mm-hmm. We say, let's keep going. That's called work, right? So it's reframing how we think about it, because when you think about it as this arduous, awful, tough thing that you have to do, of course you don't want to do it, right? So I think that we have to think about the fact that we do work every day. We get up every single day when we don't want to, and we go to a place sometimes where we're like, oh, I'm tired, I don't want to go, and we still go. And then when we get there, we put our all into it and we do the thing. Yeah. So I think DEI has to be reframed, because it's not about this arduous, hard thing. It's that it is going to help you to accomplish all of the other goals that you have within the company. And it's going to help you to accomplish them to a level and a degree that you didn't even think was possible.
So the real question is, do they believe it's valuable, or how valuable do they? Because the incentives we have to get up and go to work are kind of clear, right? It is crucial to either our life style or needs, or our ego needs, or whatever, right? And so the real hard question underneath it all is, do you believe that this is going to make you and your company materially better? Which then goes under a little bit further to say, what are your biases? What are your stereotypes? Because if you believe that in order for your company to be more diverse, you're not going to be as excellent, your performance isn't going to be as high, then of course you're going to be like, oh, well, I really love the Black people, but, right? I mean, and also, like, so many people have a sense of supremacy or elitism, or a way of valuing people, right? And so this is about rethinking how we value people, rethinking about who's smart and who's not smart, rethinking about where creativity comes from and innovation comes from. And so if you don't have that good link between your company's overall purpose and strategy and DE&I, it's very hard for people to go all in. So what that means is they might hire a person, maybe two, to work with their, you know, thousands of folks, employees. They may give some money to an outside group, right? But they don't see it as integral to their success. They don't understand what I believe is that if you're going to go into the future and be successful as a company and be relevant and competent, et cetera, this is your work. But that is hard sometimes for people to believe because they've never had to do it in order to be successful.
Right. So companies that do it and are being successful is Netflix. I mean, we have to talk about this, right? Because people who've heard me talk in the last couple of weeks, they've heard me say that, everyone's talking about the great resignation and how difficult it is right now for people to find employees. And I keep saying, first of all, it's not the great resignation. Again, I always like to do a reframing because the great resignation makes it seem as though, how dare you employees not come back to us, right? And it's like, no, it's a great reevaluation because people are reevaluating their priorities. They are reevaluating the way they've been treated in the past few years. And they realize the pandemic was like a jolt. They got knocked out of a system that they couldn't get out of before.
Yeah.
And now that they've been knocked out, they're not in a hurry to get back in, right? And so companies that are struggling to hire right now, I have to say to them, if you are struggling to hire, there's a problem, right? And that problem is you, the employer, because people are not clamoring to go back to you, but they're clamoring to go to Netflix, right? Why are they clamoring to go to Netflix? Because Netflix treats them right.
Right. I mean, you see all these signs like help wanted. I'm like, you better raise yours. You better raise what you're paying people. I mean, folks are like, why am I going to do this? Right. And at Netflix, what I think is there are a couple of things. I think it's just teaming with like really, really bright people who are very much motivated to do their best work. And also this is an idea at Netflix, which is we hired you because you're good. So we know that, right? So do your thing, like do your best thing. You're the best version of yourself. So, me coming in, I'm just like, okay, what is my imagination about what DE&I can look like, right? Because I've always been in those places where I've had to limit, or I'd had a great idea and I'd be like, I have this great idea. And they were like, yeah, I don't think we're going to do that. So now
that's nice
idea, right? So I think it's that. I also think that they have put so many resources behind DE&I. Like we have 20 some people on our team. Our company only got to 10,000 just a while ago. And the reason why we have that many people is because we're embedding them into all the business units, like usually what people have for HRBP systems. We don't have a replica of that, but we do have an inclusion partner in each of the business units and in each of the regions. So that is also like, I think a real show of commitment. And then the other thing that I think is really powerful is that the company has said that this work is everyone's, and they've hired a group of, or I would say I have hired a group of professionals, practitioners, right? Not, hey, you're a woman. Would you like to lead? Right. You're gay, you're Black. Would you like to lead our, our initiative? And I mean, I get it. Some companies, maybe they don't, I'm not going to say they don't have the money, that their priorities don't allow them.
Well, it goes back to what you said. They don't value it, right? They don't understand. They haven't made that link, right, between hiring these individuals and the value that they're going to bring to the company.
And can I say one more thing? There are people, and I don't mind people getting these opportunities, but there are people who are getting into these seats for DE&I and they have not done their work. They have not done their work. They have not done their work. You have to do your personal work to be good at this job. It's great to read some books. It's great to go to some conferences. But the question is, what are my biases? How has my life been shaped? Who do I feel comfortable with and uncomfortable? What do I know about ableism? What do I know about mental health? Like, for example, I've been catching myself, like my whole team has been like, oh my gosh, we're so ableist. We've got to pay attention to that. Even the words that come out of our mouths, lots of us are starting to reevaluate like the words of insane and crazy and all of those things that have been used to really oppress groups of people that have mental health challenges or who have a different way of thinking, neurodiversity, whatever. So I just wanted to put that plug out there because this work is hard. when you think about how much we're trying to change. And so
Right.
all of us have to really, A, take care of ourselves, but B, we also have to do the work that we're asking other people to do.
Thank you. Oh my goodness. So I have refrained from speaking on this because then you get labeled a hater, right? And it's like, I'm not hating on people in the role, but I need you to not go into the role and then cause more harm, right? Because the number of times we've had to come in where a company said, well, they're really reluctant for us to hire you because we had somebody else come in and they did this and they didn't do it right. And I'm not saying that we're the best or that we're all right, but we are at least are paying attention to that and understand, when we get feedback that we are looking at that and saying, okay, yeah, we need to go harder here, go softer here. Like, you're going to meet people where they are, but you also have to do the work ourselves. And so to your point, we are doing that, right? We're looking at our ableist language. We're looking at, like, one of the areas I realize I'm failing in terribly is even in just making my PowerPoint presentations more, what's the word? Making it easier, right? For people who have disabilities to be able to make sure that I've got the captions up, things like that. And so it is work, right?
Yeah.
But it's work to include, if you really value other people and you care about their potential impact and their input, right? Then you have to do that work. And I think that's the part that people, they skip over. And we are doing that with leaders, right? That is the number one thing that we're doing right now is every leader, we are sitting with them, we're coaching, we're actually doing the internal work for them and explaining to them, you have to understand your culture, how you show up. You've got to do the introspection before you can start going out there and talking to other people about this. Because if you don't know who you are, how are you going to be able to, have the empathy even to have the conversations that are needed?
Yeah. And it's a lot about, when people like, I wrote the book, What If I Say the Wrong Thing? So I do know that this is what people are asking, but I'm like, and then what? Like, what if you say the wrong thing? Okay. It's not the end of the world. If you are willing to account for it, if you're willing to learn to do differently, right? Because a lot of people say to me, are you going to write the What If the Wrong Thing Is Said to Me book? Because that is the experience that a lot of people are having. And so the other word that I really think is important is practice, practice, practice. You're not going to get good at it without being bad at it first, sadly, right? Just go on ahead. And lots of us were, I've heard a lot of my folks inside talking about how many memos they were writing and correcting for leaders, especially during the whole George Floyd murder and the racial awakening. And people just like, okay, I am not like a speechwriter. Like, why am I doing this? And I'm like, at some point, people got to go out there. They got to do their best, make their mistakes, get their feedback, say their apologies, and then account, which is to say, saying apologies is not enough. You got to start doing your self-reflection. What happened there? Why did it happen? What else do I need to know? And then get working, right? So those are the things that I think make a difference. So you don't have to be perfect. You're not going to be perfect.
No one's perfect.
None of us are. However, there is a thing, and you know this, Stacey, that is in corporate culture that is about perfectionism. It's about covering your tail. It's about really not being vulnerable and not being empathetic. Like, these are problematic issues. Right. And white culture has shaped corporate culture. And I think that they are starting to recognize that there's nothing wrong with like being strong and courageous or whatever, but it needs to be balanced off with listening and empathy, curiosity.
Right. Well, and authenticity. So I think the other thing that we talk a lot about is if you make the mistake, it will be much more likely for your apology afterwards to be received if you were authentic in the first place, right? If I was coming from a place of genuineness, then, because we can feel that, right? As humans, we still have that innate ability to see BS, right? And see through the things you're not saying, right? To see the body language, to hear the things that you don't actually say out loud. And if you aren't coming with authenticity, it is going to make this whole process really difficult for you.
Yeah.
So part of it is just being authentic and like, yeah, I do actually truly care. So many times we have conversations with leaders and they say, well, how do I tell them that I really care about this and I want to do this, but I just don't want to get it wrong? I'm like, that.
Yeah.
Exactly that. Just say that.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. But you got to realize the success model, that's not in the success model. Authenticity is not in the success model, right? And many of these company cultures, right? So everybody has learned to cover. And, you know, we talk about covering being something that minority folks or folks who are underrepresented do or have been historically marginalized. But the whole culture is about covering, right? So in other words, not being your authentic self. And yes, it may be more difficult for people who were never even thought of when these cultures were created, but it's also difficult for the average, you know, white guy, you know, because he's been taught what success looks like, what it acts like, what it says, what it doesn't say. And it's not about vulnerability. It's not about admitting when you're wrong. Oh, no, no, no. Right. So we're talking about whole new types of thinking and being and all sorts of new paradigms. And that is what I think is, in some cases, it has caught fire. And when it does, it's beautiful. It's beautiful to watch a leader say something, realize that it's not like read the room, see they've made a mistake, and say something like, I feel like I just stepped in it. Did I just step in it? Okay, let me try it again. Right. That to me warms my heart.
Right. And that's the thing is that point, right? That we are in this place of change. Work has changed. And so understanding now that the more that you can step in and embrace this, right, the better it's going to be. And I think once they do it, it's like you said, practice. Once they do it and they see the room and they see the result of that, it's like, oh, I like this. I want to do more, right? And that's the thing that we're trying to tip people to is from this place, because as you said, everyone is in a place where they're all covering. Like when we do our assessments, it's not just Black people, like you said, it's everyone. And that's what we show them. We say, look, when we come in and we say, this is an issue. Yes, it's an issue for 85% of Black people in your company, but it's also an issue for 63% of white people in your company.
Right.
So if you fix it, you're not just fixing it for the Black people, right? You're not just fixing it for the gay people. You're not just fixing it for the women. You're fixing it for everyone.
Yeah.
You are creating a culture that works for everyone. Instead of right now, it only works for like 43% of the white people. Right? Why not make a culture that works for 100% of everybody?
Yeah, yeah. And again, I feel like that really rests on you recognizing, A, there is a culture, right? And that culture prefers certain folks. And it's time for the company to change and shift that culture so that people of all sorts of backgrounds can really thrive. Once you decide you're going to hire difference, you have to figure out how to cultivate the value of that difference, right? So if you are not going to change your culture, don't hire people in it that have not been well represented before, because they're not going to thrive. And what it's going to do is, and then they're going to leave and you're like, I don't know why they don't stay. Or they're going to be asked to leave, and that's going to feed the stereotypes about them not being fit. Right. So this is, I think, some of the hardest work in the world is to recognize, you know, sometimes you go to places and you're like, you're not ready. Right. So readiness. And so I'll say to our folks out here who are in this work, readiness is an important assessment. What are people ready for? And what, because, you know, people, and then you got the good people and they're like, oh, and yeah, and we're going to hire these people. We're going to do this and whatever. And you're like, the situation is not going to work well here.
It doesn't support it, right? Like that's what we literally do. We go in, we do these DEI readiness assessments, and we have to tell people like, you know, like I, as a consultant in this work, I'm constantly second guessing myself because I feel like people think, oh, you're not going hard enough. You're not doing enough. And it's like, yeah, but we have to meet people where they are. You can't throw people in to the deep end of the pool and not know if they can swim.
Yeah.
Right. We have to ask these questions. And so you have to like move through that water Do I want everyone in the deep end swimming like crazy? Hell yes. But am I trying to kill people along the way? No, right? Like I'm not trying to do more harm,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it is about identifying those people who are in the deep end and swimming and saying, great, let me help, let me get you to help, right? Let's move people through the water. And
Yeah.
that's what we end up doing is identifying those people, like you said, who are like, yeah, let's do this. We should be going harder, faster. I'm like, that's great that you think that, but turn around and look at the people behind you who we've left behind. We need to go get them, right?
Yeah.
And bring them along.
Exactly. Exactly. I mean, one of the things also that I think is important and hard to do, especially if you get to be a certain age, is like Brian Stevenson would say, the proximity is lacking. That means you don't have a lot of close relationships with people who are different from you in some significant way. And I think this is a problem for many of us. I mean, in some cases, people who are from marginalized groups have had to create relationships with majority groups in order to be successful, right? So sometimes their relationships are much more broader, but how authentic those relationships are is a whole nother story. But definitely when we're talking to leadership, and often leadership comes from the majority groups, they don't have real authentic relationships with people in their lives who are significantly different by race or by class or by religion or by like where you grew up, you name it, a sexual orientation. And so they're still kind of at arm's length.
Right.
So we're talking to them about bias and we're talking to them about inclusion and so forth, but they don't have like real relationships. So that's one of the things that I am always recommending to leaders. And I don't mean like go out and be like, hey, you're a trans person. Can we have a relationship? Right. You actually have to like pay attention. And usually they're on your team, or they're in your children's school, or they are at your, board meeting. But there are ways in which you need to try to make those connections, because if you don't, you're always going to be worried. Like, am I saying the wrong thing? Am I saying the right thing? Or whatever. But when you have a friend, like I remember I have a friend who's Jewish. And one time I was explaining something about this girl in my school, and I had gone to a school that had a very large Jewish community. And I called the woman a certain name, a certain phrase. And my Jewish girlfriend was like, girl, you can't say that. I was like, I can't say that. No, but they said that. And I was like, oh my God, I'm doing the same thing the white people do to black people. Right. Like that. I mean, because I was around it and people were using those. She's like, no. But you can do that with a friend. You can do that with a friend. It's hard to do that with a colleague. But once you have friends and authentic relationships where people know where you're coming from, they know your heart, they know you care, you don't know, they'll correct you, right? And then you don't have to hurt yourself in front of strangers.
Well, that's what I tell people all the time, right? Like that coworker is not a relationship status, it's a label, right? You don't actually have a relationship. So you can't start having these deep conversations because you haven't created a relationship yet, right? Yeah. You have to start by, and it's simple things like in the morning, you ask your coworker, how are you doing? Fine. You keep walking. That wasn't a conversation, right?
Yeah.
That was not a conversation,
yeah.
Right? Because if I ask my friend, how are they doing? They will never answer me with fine. Yeah. They will tell me how they're doing, right? There'll be some adjectives in there. There will be some explanations. So that's the thing we have to start with, is having those conversations and getting to know people one-on-one before we start to dive into some of these deeper conversations. Because to your point, yeah, you can have them, because when you trust people, they're going to give you benefit of the doubt. Like your friend is going to be like, oh girl, you can't say that. I know you didn't mean anything by it, but don't say that. Right?
Don't embarrass me out there in the world.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. And part of it also, if we go back to culture, is that the cultures are transactional. They are not set up to be relational. Even how we think about work, like, oh, you can't be too tight with someone who is a person that you are supervising, because then you won't be able to get the best work out of them, right? That's how we think about these things. This is how we've been taught. And so now when we talk about relationship building, although relationships are being built with certain people, if you go back to the bias issue again, right? So who are you close to and why? And what does that tell you about where you might be leaning, who you're giving the benefit of the doubt to, and what biases you might want to start working on?
Right. So I threw up on the screen a bit.ly link. It's bit.ly/DEI-resources. You need the caps in there. That has some resources that Renee has generously provided to you, as well as a resource that I have provided that will help you as you're moving forward in this DEI journey. And so we want you to be able to go grab those resources. If for some reason you can't get them, just send me a message, whatever, we'll get them sent out. I'll post links to them. They'll be out there, but I want to make sure that everyone has access to that. Also excited again, like I said, if you haven't watched the Unconscious Bias course, it is also available in 4 languages and it is free through October 15th. So you have no excuse to not spend 24 minutes watching Unconscious Bias. You can also watch Renee's course. There are a number of them. There's a whole learning path, right, that LinkedIn has put together. So I encourage you to take a look at those, use the resources, educate yourself, start with yourself before you start going out trying to talk to others. And last thing I want to mention is that I have a link here for Dr. Eddie Moore Jr.'s 21-day racial equity challenge. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so that Eddie is the person who is responsible for the white privilege conference, which if you haven't gone is amazing and you should go. But he and a few other people put together this 21-day challenge, which of course, 21 days is like starting a new habit if you're trying to make it stick. So books, activities, all sorts of things that you can do. And it definitely makes a difference if you want to get on that path.
Awesome. Perfect. Well, thank you so much. I'm going to also just pop back up the resources again, because in there, like I said, 3 PDFs from Renee. There's also a link to my community that I've created where I am putting in lots of free resources. There isn't a ton in there yet, but we'll be adding more and more and more, because exactly what you talked about, we just have to get educated. We need the tools, we need the resources. There's so much out there. So we are curating it and giving it to you and making it easy for you. So I want to thank you again, Renee. This was such a great conversation. We could probably talk all day.
Real. And we should. Let's do it offline. But thank you, Stacey, and thanks to LinkedIn.
And thank you to everyone that joined in. I know there were a ton of comments. Thank you all. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.